If you want to store multiple variables in one place, a collection could come in handy. Collections store many variables of the same or different types depending on what language you're using. You have a couple of options to choose from, but I'll be covering the two most commonly used ones. Hi, I'm Victor, and today in Height Above Sea Level, we'll be looking at lists and arrays in C#. Before we get started, if you want to talk more about this kind of thing, be sure to follow me on Twitch at Height Above Sea Level, where I do some live coding sessions as well as try and answer some of your questions as best I can. This video uses concepts from the loops and fields and properties videos, so if you're not familiar with some of the things I'm discussing, watch those videos first and I'll link them to the top right of your screen. Alright, first up, we'll be looking at arrays. And we'll be seeing how you declare arrays and some of the things that you need to know about arrays. So an array in C# has a fixed size. That means when you're declaring them, you need to specify how many things are going to be inside the array. And why don't we just see how you declare one in C#. You may have noticed that I did declare one in the loops video, but I'm going to show you a couple of other ways to declare arrays and how many other ways you can use them in C#, okay? So let's see the first way to create an array. You can do this int and the square brackets. Whenever you see this int, the square brackets, then it's most likely an array. So a class or a type and the square brackets and then the name. And then we say new int square brackets. And then inside these square brackets is where you specify how many numbers or how many items are going to be inside this array. So for this one, I'm going to say 5. And then semicolon at the end. So let me write here, this is an empty array. Empty array. Something you may have noticed is the new keyword. So this is an object. Now this numbers is an array object because we use the new keyword. Remember in the classes video, we use this new keyword if we want to instantiate our class. But you see, this doesn't look like a class because all arrays inherit from this array class. This is the array class that they inherit from. So when you say new, it's like we're making a new array and we're using this syntax. All of these arrays that we make like this inherit from the array class, and that's why we consider them as objects. So this is how to create an empty array, and this is one of the ways of creating an array. But let's say this is if you don't know the values ahead of time. But if you know the values ahead of time, you can create it like this. We can say float, square brackets. We can say other numbers. And then we can say a new float, square brackets. And then from here, we use the curly braces. You can optionally set the number here, but if you want to, you can just say the values that are going to be inside this array. So we can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then square brackets, semicolon. So this is another way of declaring an array, but this uses what we saw in the classes video as early objects initialization syntax. So let's say early object initialization syntax initialization. So this means that we're creating the array and we're specifying the items inside the array. And one thing you may have noticed about floats is that I didn't put the F after the number. You can use them this way if they're whole numbers, but if you have a decimal like 1.5, then you're going to have to specify the F at the end. But if you're using whole numbers, you can leave them like this. But for this video, I'm just going to add them just so it's clear. These are floats, and these are ints. But as you can see also, if you add a 5 here, it works because we specified it has 5 items and then we explicitly specify them, or you can choose to remove it. But if you put 6, you get an error because you only have 5 items. You have to have 6 of them. I'm just going to remove it so that there's a clear distinction between this one and this one. All right, why don't we move on to the next one? Let's say you wanted to create an array of string. So we can say this names, and then we say curly braces. We can say John, then not Joplin, but John. And then we can say Tom. And then we can say Alyssa. So this is another way of declaring an array. But this time we didn't use the new keyword because the compiler knows that if this is a return type and then you use curly braces, then this is an array of whatever number of items you have in here. And the items are always separated by a comma. So this is the first item, this is the second item, this is the third item. But the only thing about this one is that if you can't use the var keyword, if you put var like this, it doesn't work. You have to specify the return type. Maybe I can write that here as well. Cannot, doesn't work with var. Let me say it doesn't work with var keyword. You have to specify the type. Must specify type. And this is the third way of declaring an array, but you still can use the var keyword. You just have to write the array in a different way. So let's say you wanted to have an array of booleans. You can say var booleans equals new bool. Then you can have the square brackets, curly braces, like that. This is how we use the array. This is how you declare an array using the var keyword. And you also have to specify it like this. And you can even, you don't have to do it this way. You can even use this and it still works. Or you can do this if you know the values ahead of time. So that's how you declare an array using the var keyword. So all these are the different types you declare an array. You use whichever works for you. You can use a var, you can use it like this if you know values ahead of time. Or you can use it like this with early object initialization. It's all up to you. At the end of the day, all of these will be an array. All right, so why don't we look at how to access values inside an array. So we're going to use this other numbers array because we've already declared the values inside it. And we want to access one of the values inside this array. So for this one, I'm going to change this value to like 12, 25, maybe 36, and 45, and maybe 85. Right? Maybe even add a decimal in there, 25.7. Okay, to access the values inside an array as well as in a list, you use what are known as indexes. And arrays and lists are what's known as zero indexed. So what does zero indexed means? Let me just write use to access values, and then I can say zero indexed. Zero indexed means that the position of the array starts from 0. Say position starts from 0. Position of items, just to be a bit more clear, position of items starts from 0. So this is 0, position 1, position 2, position 3, position 4. But the total number of items in this array are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 items in this array. This is the first position. This is position 0, position 1, position 2, position 3, position 4. So if you want to access this first value, say console.writeLine, the array, which is called other numbers, remember that's the name, and then square brackets, and then the number, which is called the index of the value you want to access. So if you say 0, we'll go to other numbers and we go to the first position, which is position 0. Control and F5. Give it a second, it's building. That's going to give me 12 because this is the first item and the first item's index is 0. If I want to get the second item, I can say 1, Control and F5, 25.7. And as you can see, 25.7 is the second item. And if you want to get the last item, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, I can say 4, Control and F5, 85. So that's how you access values inside an array or even a list, as we'll see later on, using an index. And both of these are 0 indexed. So the first position is 0, second position is 1, third position is 2, fourth position is 3, and the last position here is 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you use the index here to access those values. So if you wanted to see, we've looked at the index, but if you want to see the total number of items inside an array, you use the length property. So dot length. Remember, arrays also have properties. So it has length, and this is the one that you will use and it will tell you how many values are inside this array. So Control and F5, 5, because there are 5 items inside this array. Count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you added another one, like 99F, it's going to give us what? 6. So the length property gives us the number of items inside the array. And that right there is indexes in arrays, and it's just a bit of an intro to indexes. So why don't we now look at array methods? So we have this array, but we want to do a couple of things. Maybe we want to use some of the values in a different way. We want to do some work on each value. This is where array methods come in. So in order to use the array methods, remember you have to say array. This is like the class above that which these arrays derive from. So we say array dot. And if you go to this cube, it gives you all the methods that are available for use with arrays. So why don't we look at a couple of these? We've already seen, no, we haven't seen any just yet. So if you want to use a method, array dot, let's say the sort method, and then you pass in the array that you want to sort. So right now we want to sort the numbers, other numbers array. So what this does is it sorts values or items. Let me use items in ascending order. So once we've called this, it's going to go to other numbers and it's going to arrange them in ascending order. So why don't we go loop through all these and write them on the consoles? Remember loops? If you're not familiar with loops, that is available in the loops video, and I will link that to the top right of your screen. But before we loop through that, if you're enjoying the content, please consider supporting me over on Patreon at patreon.com/height above sea level. And all patrons will get this custom Sakura theme that I came up with. And I will give you all the instructions of how to set it up so your code editor looks just like mine. So if you're enjoying the content, please support me on patreon.com/height above sea level, and you will get this custom Sakura theme as a thank you from me. All right, let's look at this sort method. So we've already sorted the array. We loop through it for each tab twice. Tab again for each number, tab in other numbers array. Enter to go into the curly braces. Want to write the number on the console. So if you press Control and F5, 12, 25.7, 36, 44, 85, you see smallest first, and it keeps getting bigger until we reach the biggest. And those are the values in here. But if you were to remove this, with Control X, it's going to give us the arrays just the way they are. The values inside this array just the way they are. Control and F5. And as you can see, 12, 24, 12, 25, 36, 44, 85, that's exactly the way they are over here. But if I call this sort method like that, Control and F5 now, you see it sorts them in ascending order. And that right there is a sort method in a nutshell. It doesn't require too much thinking about. It's just a simple, if you want to sort all the items inside an array, you use the sort method. So why don't we look at another one? Let's say array.clear. And what do you think this one does? It clears the array. So if we add other numbers in there, that's the array that you want to clear. You want to clear other numbers. What does this do? It clears the array, or if you have values inside them, it sets all the values to the default value, if you want to look at it that way. But the technical explanation is that it clears the array. So Control and F5, 0, 0, 0, 0. Why are they zeros? Remember in the numbers video, all numbers, the default value for numbers is 0. So we've cleared the array, and now it's just giving us the default values for numbers because they're supposed to be floats. There are spaces, 5 spaces for floats, but since we haven't declared those floats, it just gives us the default value for each of those spaces. So I press Control and F5. That is what happens. But if you remove this, Control and F5, it gives you the values you specified over here. All right. So that right there is the clear method. So I can say Control K, Control C to comment this. I can say this one clears the array. Clears all or just clears the array. I think that's just a better way to say it. All right, so why don't we look at another one called reverse. So array dot reverse, and then the array we want to reverse goes in there like that. This one, as the name suggests, reverses the order of the items in this array. So 85 is first, then 44 is second, 36 third, and so on and so forth. So if you loop through the array and write it on the console, what do you think will give us? 85, 44, 36, 25, and 12. And that is this in reverse order. Without this and Control and F5, it gives us in the order they are: 12, 25, 36, 44, 85. That's the order that they are in right now. But if we say reverse, it reverses the order so that the last item is first, second last item is second, and so on and so forth. And that right there is the reverse method. I can say reverses order of items in array. All right, so why don't we look at another one called IndexOf. So what does IndexOf do? It finds the index of a value specified. So the first parameter, remember parameters and arguments and methods. If you're not familiar with that, I have a video on methods that I will link to the top right of your screen, just so you can get yourself up to speed with parameters, arguments, and named arguments, and so on and so forth. So the first argument is the array you want to look at. That's the other numbers array. And what value are we looking for in this other numbers? So let's say you want to find the index of 44. So the second parameter argument is what you're looking for. And we can store this in a variable. Let's say answer. We store that in a variable, and then we will write that variable on the console. So I can remove this for now. So what is going on here? We're calling the IndexOf method. We're looking inside the other numbers array, this one. And what are we looking for? We're looking for 44F, that one. We're looking for the index of 44F. And we store that in a variable, we should then write on the console. So if we press Control and F5, 3. That is the index of 44. Remember, 0, 1, 2, 3. Indexes are used to access value, and there's 0. The arrays and lists are 0 indexed, so it starts from 0, 1, 2, 3. 3 is the index of 44. And you can also do this with, let's say, 25.7, Control and F5, 1. Remember, 0, 1. That is the index of 25.7. But let's say you look for a value that doesn't exist. What's going to happen? It will give us -1. Every time the value doesn't exist, -1 is returned to tell us that, hey, we didn't find the index, so we're just giving you this -1 to let you know that that doesn't exist. So you can use that if you know the value that, you know, the array has this value, but you want to use the index for something, you use the IndexOf method. And maybe I can say Control K, whoops. I think I did something there. I did something there that, oh, there we go. So Control K, Control C, and we can say finds index of specified item. And that right there are array methods. There are many other methods that you can look at, many other methods. Just click on this cube and you can mess around with these and see what you can figure out and see if you can understand what they say. Remember, there's always a little tooltip that gives you the explanation of what each method does. So you can read on those and mess around with them and see if you can come up with something. But that is it for arrays. Why don't we move on to lists? Let me add a little space there so we can say lists. So lists, unlike arrays, are flexible. They're not a fixed size, so you can say are flexible. Once you declare a list, you can add to the list, you can remove the list. The size can change as many times as you want it to. But something else about a list is that lists are found in what's known as system.collection.generic. So what do I mean by this? .generic name space. So what do I mean by this? I haven't touched on this before, But in order to use certain classes in older console applications, you'd have to go up here and add what's known as a using statement. So using system.collections.generics, you'd have to add this in your application, your console application, because this list class, that class, is in a different namespace, this namespace. So because it's in a different namespace, we have to tell the application that, hey, we want to use the class in this other namespace that is not the same as our namespace. This is, list is in collections.generic. And that's why we say using system and collections.generic. Remember, namespaces store many classes and the list is inside this class. But in the new version of console applications, there are what's known as global using statements. So what does that mean? It means that all these using statements are declared in one place, so we don't have to keep declaring them inside all of our files. We'd have to use that here as well. Let's say we use the list in this file, we still have to say system and collections.generic using that way. And then we also have to come program class, add this over there. So those global using statements make it so that all these using statements are declared in one place, and then we don't need to worry about them. We just need to use the class available in those namespaces without worrying about having to keep adding these using statements. And that is why I wanted to mention this system and collection.generic namespace, just so you can get up to speed. So why don't we declare a list? So a list is what's part of what's known as a generic, and I'll explain that shortly. So a list, we say what type goes inside the list, and we could say integers, and just like before, we create an integer object, tab twice to finish that. And this is how I declare a list. But what is this? What is this less than and greater than symbol? That's what is known as generics. And just like in English, generics is the opposite of specific. So this means that if you see something like this, it means that you get to decide, or not you, but many things can be inside here. Remember, you can have an integer, you can have a string in here, you can have a float, you can even have a boolean, but we want to have an int because it's generic. This part is generic. We get to decide what goes in here. It's generic. It's the opposite of specific. If it was specific, then it'll only have an int type and you can never change it. But since it's generic, you can add any type in here. And generics is a bit complex, and it's something that you'd have to have its own video, and it's a bit more complex. I don't want to talk about it too much for beginners, but just know that anything that has these greater than and less than symbols and a type inside them, that is a generic, and you can include any type that you want or any class that you want in here. All right, so this is how you declare a list. You can also declare a list like this, using the var keyword, a new list of type string. And just like before, we can even use early object initialization. So we can say players like Lionel Messi. We can say LeBron James. We can say Serena Williams. And we can also say Naomi Osaka. Then put the semicolon at the end. So this is using early object initialization. Whoops. Early object initialization. So this is the same as what we did here, but we're doing it for lists. And this list right here is an empty list. So this is how you declare an empty list, and this is how you use early object initialization. So these are the two ways that I've declared lists before. I don't know if there are others. If you do know about them, let me know in the comments below. But these are the two most common ways of declaring a list. You can either write the type like this, or you can use the var keyword and use the new keyword here to instantiate a list. And you can even have some early object initialization. So that is how you declare a list in C#. And remember, generics, you get to decide what goes in here the same way we've done over here. All right, and just like before, lists are also 0 indexed. So if you wanted to write the first player, we'll say players, write that on the console, Control and F5, Lionel Messi, because that is the first one here. And then even you can do index of 2 like that. Serena Williams, remember? 0, 1, 2. Lists are also 0 indexed, and that's how you access a value or an item inside a list. All right, lists also have methods. So why don't we look at list methods? So list you can do, unlike the arrays where you have to type array then dot, this one you can go directly into the list and say players dot. So I mentioned that lists are flexible, so you can have an add method and we can say which player do we want to add. We want to add Cristiano Ronaldo, and then we say semicolon. So list methods, this is the first one, add. What add does, it adds a value to the end of the list. So it goes to the players list. Also add method, we're going to add Cristiano Ronaldo to the end of this list, and because it's a string, this also has to be a string. So why don't we loop through? Remember loops? If you're not familiar with loops, that's also on the top right of your screen. Tab twice, var for every player in players, enter to go inside the curly braces, console right line, player. So let's remove this first so we can see all the players on the console. Control and F5, Messi, James, Williams, Sakura. Those are the ones we have here. But then if I add this, add Cristiano Ronaldo, look, Cristiano Ronaldo is added at the end of the list. So you can even add other players, like maybe we can say Venus Williams, Control and F5, Venus Williams is added to the end. That's what the add method does. So let me just comment this out, Control K, Control C. This is very self-explanatory. So adds an item to the end of the list. Let's look at another method, players dot remove. But before we look at remove, I want to show you the equivalent of length property. Remember in the arrays we did array.length to get the number of items inside an array. We can also use players.count .count to get the number of items inside the list. So if you write on the console players.count, that's going to give us the number of items inside this list. And Control and F5, 4 items, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So players.count is the opposite of length, is the equivalent of length in arrays. And I thought I'd just let you know that before we move on. All right, if you can add players to this players list, then it makes sense that you can also remove players to this players list. So why don't we add a couple more? Let's add Cristiano Ronaldo again. But let's add Cristiano Ronaldo, and then let's add another one, players.add. We can say we add Venus Williams, and then why don't we remove now players.remove. Let's remove Cristiano Ronaldo. Remove Cristiano Ronaldo. And then if you write on the console, Control and F5, Venus Williams, but we don't have Cristiano Ronaldo. But if we remove this remove method, we have Cristiano Ronaldo and Venus Williams. But if we add it back, we're now removing the Cristiano Ronaldo that was added. And that is the remove method in a nutshell. Self-explanatory as well. Removes item from list. Simple one, you can use it to add and remove lists. Lists are flexible, so you get to decide what you want to have inside the list and what you want to remove. Why don't we look at another method called contains? So I want to say players.contains. This method looks at the players list and checks if the whatever you provide as an argument is inside that players list, and returns a Boolean value. If it's true, it returns true. If it doesn't exist inside this list, it returns false. So let's say we were looking for Lionel Messi. Again, since this returns a variable, we can returns a Boolean value. We store that Boolean value in a variable, and then we write that on the console. Let me put a space here just so it's more visible. And we write that on the console. So it's almost like asking, does this players list contain this value? And then write that on the console. Control F5. Yes, because it contains it. If you add a couple more typos like this, it's going to return false. False because we don't have that value inside this players list. And that is the contains method in a nutshell. Very simple. Checks if an item is in a list. It's a very simple one, doesn't require a lot of explanation. So you can use that to check if there's a certain item inside your list. All right, why don't we move on to the next one? Let's say there's some that are synonymous or available in both of them. So we can also say players dot, whoops. We can also say players dot clear. Remember the clears method, the clear method. This also clears the list. Remember, just like in arrays, it clears everything inside the list so that we get the default values of the spaces in the list. Or actually it removes, player. Let me just write this again. For each, tab twice, player, inside players, enter to go into the curly braces, right on the console, player. Not that, but player. Control and F5. There's nothing here. Remember, this is just the default behavior of the console to write this whenever there's nothing on the console, because we cleared everything inside this list, and that's what the clear method does. It depends on if you want to use it in your application. If you want to, go ahead, but if you use clear, clears everything inside the list. So clears the list. Simple as that. All right, as I'm winding up, I want to show you that you can also use lists and arrays in cars as properties, in the car class as a property or a field, and also in the method as a return type and an argument. So why don't we use that as a property? So we can say prop. We can say a list of type string. Tab again. We can say model names. Tab. So as you see, we're using a list as a property. So if you're going to use this property or initialize this property, you're going to have to supply a list of values. You can also use an array like this, int. We can say license plates like that. And this property license plate is now of type array. Same thing for fields. You can also say float, or you can even say private. Remember, fields have to be private. List of type float. And we can say what do you want the car? Let's just say versions for now. It doesn't make sense, but I'm just using this as an example. And there you have it. You can use lists as fields. You can also use lists and arrays as fields and properties. But even for methods, you can return a list of type int or string or whatever you want in here as a return type. You can alternatively also use a list and array as arguments. So you can say integer array. You can say numbers. You can also use them as arguments. All right, you can use them as arguments for methods. You can use them as return types. You can use them as properties. You can also use them as fields. And one more thing also is that you can use them with your custom classes. So let's create a few custom classes here. Toyota, new car. We can say Ferrari, new car. And now we can say var cars equals a list of type car, and then we're gonna have Ford, Toyota, and then what other one? Ferrari, like that. So this is a list with the custom class that we created. Remember, we created this car class. You can even use that with lists, and you can use it with arrays as well. So it all depends on you. And that right there is lists in a nutshell. But just one more thing quickly is that you can use a list. You can use different types of loops, like you can use the for each to loop over a list and an array, or you can also use the for loop to loop over a list or an array. Those are the most common ones that you'll see being used with lists and arrays. But with that, that is all I had for you guys. Did you learn something new today? Did you learn about lists and arrays in another programming languages and are curious to see how you use them in C#? Let me know in the comments below. Again, if you did find this content helpful and useful, please consider supporting me over on Patreon at patreon.com/heightabovesealevel, and I will give you this Sakura theme as a thank you. I do stream on Twitch if you want to talk more about this kind of thing live on stream, but if that doesn't work, come hang out on Discord instead. Just click the link in the description below and become a member of the Watcher Tribe today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, from me to you, deuces.